You're listening to The Stall and Stable Show, ideas for happy horsekeeping.
If you're running a boarding or training business and struggling to stay afloat, you need to listen to this episode. If you're a professional competitor, you need to listen to this episode. If you're an equine chiropractor, hoofcare provider, veterinarian, trainer, or hauler, you need to listen to this episode. If you are not a business person, but you are in the equine industry, this episode will inspire you to make a change and get the kind of help that can turn a tough job into a much easier one. Horse people have a unique skill set that does not typically include business planning or crunching numbers. That's why a bookkeeper who understands your profession can lead the way to salvation. So listen in. This is episode 140 of the Stall and Stable Show, brought to you by American Stalls, Barn Pros, and Triple Crown Nutrition. Today is Wednesday, April 17th, and I'm your host, Helena Harris. To get to know our sponsors, go to stallandstable.com/support. Choosing which barn components are best for your new build can be overwhelming. You think you know what you want, but once you find out just how many options there are and requirements, things can get overwhelming very quickly. The consultants at American Stalls know a lot more than just barn design. They know horses, they know about building, they know about timing, and after a phone call or two, they'll know a lot about what's important to you and your horses. Trust me when I say that it is a relief to have their expertise on your side when you're working on a barn project. Do not hesitate to reach out to them with questions. They are so happy to put their expertise and their energy to work for you. You can find their contact information and a lot more at americanstalls.com. My guest today is Pam Saul, a certified bookkeeper, but she's so much more than that. She's the founder of Saul Bookkeeping, and she has over 30 years experience in the agribusiness, right? And in the horse business. You'll hear all about that in our conversation. But many years ago, Pam realized the need for knowledgeable and skilled bookkeeping services for businesses that wanted professional help, but didn't need or couldn't afford a full-time person doing the books. Hello, horse people. So she created her business to solve a problem, to fill a gap. And she's here to talk to us today about how the bookkeeping service works, what benefits it provides for the horse professional, the equine business owner, and how it works on the front end, what the benefit is to your business, how it works on the back end, and a lot more. So let's welcome Pam Saul to the Stall and Stable Show. Well, good morning, Pam, and welcome to the Stall and Stable Show.
Thank you for having me.
This is one of my favorite kind of podcast interviews when I have absolutely no idea who you are, where you came from, what you do. It just turns out to be one of the best conversations. So I'm excited to have you here and learn about your contributions to the horse world. Tell us what you do.
I am a farm girl. I grew up on a 200-acre farm. We started with cattle. And then my baby sister is Mary Lisa Leffler. She's a Grand Prix rider. And my other sister is Patty Foster. She's one of the top trainers in the East Coast. And when Mary started riding, we then changed from cattle to horses. And in the last 20 years, our facility is a boarding facility, and we have about 70 horses. Well, I wasn't the sister that could ride the ponies, and I ended up being the sister that did all the bookkeeping. So my job was to keep Patty and Mary straight, which was a full-time job. So I did all the bookkeeping, the invoicing, the payroll, all that kind of stuff. And I ended up going off the farm and working for a CPA, and then realized that I didn't want to do that. I more wanted to focus on agriculture. So I started my own business in 2011 as a remote bookkeeper for the agriculture industry. So I did boarding facilities, I did acupuncturists, dentists, farriers, haulers, all the different industries that support horses. And then that mushroomed out into Main Street businesses. And so now I have a bookkeeping business that spans the United States. I have 9 employees that also span the United States. And I do remote bookkeeping where I work with equestrian and agricultural businesses, which are about 50% of my business. And then the other is I specialize in lawyers doing their bookkeeping. They have a very specialized bookkeeping business, and they might be great with the written word, but they suck with their numbers. So I do lawyers' books, and then the rest are Main Street businesses. So that's how I got to where I am today.
That I have 100 questions. The most enticing one is, let's talk about a boarding facility with 70 horses. I'm going to park that for a minute because that is a full-time job for 9 people. And I like that you mentioned you also serve lawyers, because horse people and lawyers don't typically do what they do or pursue their careers because they want to keep track of numbers or because they're good at it. They're good at other things. Also, when you are in the equestrian industry, a lot of times it's difficult to make a living on just that market. You do have to diversify. You got to reach out a little bit, or it ebbs and flows. You know, there are times when you can really scrape by on the equestrian client and times where you just need to branch out. So what kind of software do you use, or what do you lean on the heaviest in order to provide the services that you do? Are you a QuickBooks house?
So I do QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, and then I do remote services through online and desktop to get to my clients' books. So I have access through a computer, through a remote server. That's how I take care of everybody. So I'm kind of like a bookkeeping ninja. I go in and work when you're not there. I have 9 staff members who are my team, and they work within the books. I have actually 97 clients. I'm getting ready to celebrate. I've got 3 letter of engagements out. I'll be at 100 clients. So it's pretty exciting right now for me in my business.
One of the things that's always terrifying to me, and I've tried at times especially when I first started as a sole proprietor, to wear many hats and to leverage as much software as I could in order to do that. But I found, and even for me, coming from a software background, I found QuickBooks very difficult to navigate. Not because it was overly complicated, but because it used a lot of industry jargon, like accounting jargon. I don't want to call it jargon. They're terms, but they're terms that I was not familiar with, and terms that the average horse professional isn't really going to be familiar with. And so after working with it for 6 or 7 months, I said, I really need a bookkeeper. I need someone who if I had the time, could I figure out how to use it? Sure. But most of us don't have the time. Do you find that is a common situation with your clients?
So what I find a lot is that, and especially the equestrian businesses, they're embarrassed that they can't do their bookkeeping. And I go to them and go, why? Why do you feel embarrassed? You have never been trained. You've never had any access. Would you expect a CPA to know what an in and out is? Would you expect a CPA to know what a stride is, an oxer is? Would you expect them to know what a collected canter is? No, you wouldn't expect them to know that. They've had no training. So why do you expect yourself to be able to understand how to do bookkeeping work? That's not what your expertise is, and that's not what's going to make you money. You are never going to make money doing your own books. So why not have someone who's an expert in it do bookkeeping and do something in an hour that probably takes you 10 to do? If you give one lesson, you've paid for an hour of a bookkeeper. So why not give that one extra lesson and get the bookkeeping done correctly and have the bookkeeping work done be a tool for you to use? You don't need to know how to put the transactions in, but you need to know how to read a P&L. You need to know how to read your balance sheet. I would rather do the work for you and then teach you how to read a P&L so you can use that as a tool in your business.
I could not agree with you more. In fact, one of the things that we've done at Stall and Stable was create horse people friendly balance sheets, P&Ls, so they can look at it and not be completely intimidated. If purely as an educational tool, as a way to understand cash, really as a way to find cash leakages. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. Common problems that the horse professional faces. But let's continue on this path. What is your benefit to them other than freeing them up from the stress and the time it takes? What's their investment get them when they invest in a bookkeeper?
Peace of mind, security, support, expertise, all of these things. When you have someone take a portion of the 27 hats that you're wearing on your head as the business owner of an equestrian business, when you have someone take that off your plate, all of those things fall into place. So when I'm doing the bookkeeping for an equestrian business, they no longer have to say to the parent of the kid that they're teaching, hey, you haven't paid your bill. That goes away because now I do that instead. So it changes the dynamic that they have with that parent. So instead of when that kid comes and in their mind, they're thinking that mother hasn't paid for the month's worth of lessons, and that puts, a negative connotation to that child, that's gone. Because now all they have to do is teach that child because I'm taking care, and that mother didn't get a chance to be 30, 60, 90 days behind.
Yeah.
Takes that totally off their plate.
That's invaluable because the relationship between the horse professional and their clients really has to be preserved. And there are 100 different things that can come in there and compromise that relationship. We want the long-term relationships with our clients. We don't want a revolving door of boarders or riders. So I like that you take the emotional burden off the trainer, off the professional.
And also one thing that having a bookkeeper will train the clients. If a client is habitually late, always late paying, they have then been trained that that's okay because there are no consequences. Right. If you have a bookkeeper, when they don't pay, they get that late fee, they get that interest charge, and they call in, they say, hey, I got a late fee, I got an interest charge. Well, yes, your agreement states that if you don't pay the board bill in 5 days, that you get a late fee. So if you don't want a late fee next month, you need to pay on time. How would you like to pay this fee? By credit card or check?
Yes. I love this. And it's the boundaries that are needed, but no one really has the time to set or, sometimes we don't have the emotional fortitude to set them. That's just not in our personal wheelhouse. So it's nice to be able to lean on somebody who can do that for us.
Right. And I say that I'm always under the bus. So a lot of times I am what they can say is, I have a bookkeeper who's so mean, I have to get this from you, or, she won't let me. And it gives them an out, yes. Because they have a different relationship with the client that I have. So I can be the bad guy and they can go out and be the person in the ring who's teaching the child how to post, and they don't have to think about, well, have they paid this lesson or not? That's not their responsibility. So it totally takes them off the plate. And the same thing with the vendors. I can be between the vendor and them. So if they get a load of hay in and it's not right, I can be the one that says, hey, we had 35 bales that were not good. I want a discount. This is what it is. Or I can be the one that says to the hay provider, if we prepay for the hay, will you hold it in the barn? We'll pay for it, but you hold it until we need it and give me a discount on paying for that hay.
Pam, in less than 20 minutes, I'm hiring you. I am not kidding, because you know how many moldy bales are sitting in the back of my shed just waiting to be returned, or I hesitate to make that phone call because it's just going to be awkward or combative conversation. So listeners, this is, again, in 20 minutes, if you are not convinced that you need this service, whether it's Pam's service or someone else's, you need this. Although it's nice that Pam has such a broad reach. Let's talk about how it actually happens, how it works. I know that I've inquired a few times And the accountant said, well, they basically have access to your bank account, which I understand when you have someone who's trusted that's working on your behalf, you can give them access to this stuff. How does it work to get the back end set up?
Okay, so with QuickBooks Online, you actually have the ability to sync the bank account and the credit card account and PayPal or Venmo that will actually go into your bookkeeping. So those transactions will come into the system, and then those transactions are categorized correctly. That sometimes is a problem with horse people, is they don't take the time to look and see what they are, and then they put them in the wrong place, and then they can't find them.
Right.
So it's the same thing, especially if money comes in. If someone is paying you, you need to make sure that that transaction or that deposit goes against their invoice and is applied correctly. So you have an invoice that's $250. They pay you $200. I immediately am going to say, hey, why did you short it $50? And they're going to say, oh, there are 2 lessons on here that I shouldn't have paid for because she was out sick. And then I'm going to go to the client and say, she's saying she didn't have those lessons. And she's going to go, oh, yeah, that's right. So now I'm going to take those 2 lessons off. That bill's going to be paid in full. There's no problem. It's corrected. You don't have an issue. Things get kept up to date because you don't want to have to wait for 6 months and then try to go back and think, oh, did they have those lessons? Did they not have those lessons? I don't remember. So keeping the books current is really important because then you don't have to remember anymore.
It sounds like there's really not a whole lot required of the end user, of the professional, meaning I just, even if I'm taking a transaction through PayPal or Venmo, that is already connected to my bank. So you're interfacing with the bank with those transactions.
But I also interface with the owner because I need to have what's going to be invoiced. So if it's a boarding facility, I'm going to need a list of who's getting charged board and the amount. It may be a dry stall. It may be that the horse is on stall care and is in the stall 24/7, which means they get a higher cost. So a lot of what we do is maybe a spreadsheet or some Google sheet where they track and tell me who's getting charged for, because they may have a new client that comes in, or they may have a client that leaves. So we'll create a process where the information is given to me. I may need a list of the farrier list. I may need a list of who had shoeing done and how much they get charged. And then, I've got some places where they pay the farrier the total. And then when they invoice the client, they put $5 on top because they've paid the farrier and they've gone and gotten the horse and they held the horse and they took the horse back. So they put $5 on top.
Sure.
So, if I'm doing monthly invoicing, then I need to have that information so that I can track it properly.
So how do you typically communicate with your client about, is it a phone call? Do you have, like you said, is it a sheet where they update it? How often does that communication need to happen?
So it's customized with the service that the client has asked me for. If they say, hey, all I want you to do is reconcile at the end of the month, then what I need is the bank statements. But if they say, hey, I want you to invoice all my clients, then they need to provide me a spreadsheet or something. And we talk about what's the easiest way for them to get that to me. I have some where they take a picture of a page that they have of their lesson book, and they send me that on their phone. Or it's a spreadsheet in Google and we just have it in Google Drive and we all have access to it. So it depends on if they're on the road a lot, they may not have access to internet and it may be a phone call. So I customize to what works best for them.
Which is good because it's not going to get done if it's not easy for them to do it. And how often do you report back to them?
Also depends on what they want me to do for them. Some clients, I've got a hauling business where she only wants quarterly. She just sends me everything in quarterly. I create a P&L and a balance sheet for her, and that's what she wants. I more customize than maybe other bookkeepers because I know how horse people work. And I know that sometimes, they may be during indoors, they're not going to be able to contact me at all. They're in the ring at 3:00 lunging a horse because that's what time the ring is open. So I'm more customized to what the client wants than saying it's a set standard.
And it depends on the type of business. Certain business owners need to look at their balance sheet once a month because there's just so many things that are happening. They need to keep an eye on what did this month's activities do to my bottom line? And where do I need to be more efficient? We're always looking at when you're saving the business or the business owner who's struggling financially, we tell them the first place you need to look is your operating expenses. Where are you leaking cash? And then how can you change the way you run your business, the way you operate your barn so that you're more efficient? You mentioned about, a horse who's on stall rest who has a higher cost than, say, other horses. The concept of cost of goods sold, calculating COGS for, let's say, the boarding business, for example, that's something that's really unfamiliar to horse people. They don't even understand what it costs them to keep one horse in one stall for a month. How does the work that you do help them calculate that or use that information? Because you're keeping track of it. How does what you keep track of then help them understand their financial position or how they're operating their business?
Most horse people don't know what cost of goods even means. So I'm going to say to them, cost of goods is an expense, but it's a specific type of expense. And then I'll explain to them what it means. Then we're going to come up with the items that they want to put into their cost of goods sold. For a boarding facility, if they're boarding horses, it's going to be the shavings, the feed, the hay, that kind of thing. And then I'm going to explain to them the difference between what overhead expenses are, and we're going to create that. And then we're going to look at, when we put that information into a P&L, what it means. This is how many stalls you have. This is what it costs you for shavings. This is what it costs you for horses. This is what it costs you for a dry stall, because even though you don't have a horse in that stall, you still have overhead of electric, insurance, all these different things. So you have an amount that stall costs you, whether or not you have a horse in it or not. And it's going to depend on the size of the facility, the type of the facility, if they have run-in sheds as opposed to having stalls. I mean, one of the things that I tell them, you're paying somebody $15 an hour. It's not costing you $15 an hour. You have to remember that when you have an employee that's $15 an hour, you're paying employer taxes as well, state unemployment, work comp premiums. So that $15 an hour person isn't costing you 15, it's costing you somewhere around 20. So you have to think about these as a business owner. And when you hire someone, what you pay them, the stipulation is not just the hourly rate, it's the other pieces that go to that puzzle.
There's another component to this. It's preparing for growth or whether they're starting out with a new business or they need to pivot or they need to make an investment in their farm, which is what I get a lot. I want to build an indoor or I want to purchase this property. And so they need to start to prepare themselves financially to access more capital. How do I get ready to apply for a loan? Most of them don't have the snapshot of their business that they would have if they hired a bookkeeper. How can you help business owners prepare for that, getting their numbers ready so that they can then be leveraged for financing?
A lot of times when they're looking to create an indoor arena, what you have to do is you have to pencil out the what if scenario. What if I have this indoor? What changes will this make for me? So first you're going to say, okay, this is what it's going to cost to build it, but what if? What if I now have this indoor and I can now teach lessons at night? How many lessons can I now generate at night? What revenue will that bring in? At the same time, what if I have this indoor now and my electricity is going to double? So you have to pencil out all of the revenue and expenses that this new endeavor is going to create to see if it's going to be worth it.
But you've got the historical numbers as the foundation, and then they can do projections on top of that.
Correct.
Right.
But you have to think about, okay, I want to buy 5 more lesson horses. Okay, great. How much is it going to cost to buy these horses? But not just that, how much insurance am I going to have to get? How many lessons will this allow me to do? Do I have the number of clients now that will support purchasing 5 more horses? If I don't, how many more new clients do I need to get in order to support this? How much is it going to be for the blacksmith? How much more is it going to be for insurance? Yeah. How much more is it going to be for the dentist? You got to look at these things before you jump off the cliff so that you're ready and have some idea of what it's going to cost you to do this. If you pencil out the numbers and it doesn't work, then you're going to have to make some adjustments before you do it. Well, I can't afford 5 lesson horses, but if I do 2 and then I do extra marketing and I get the extra clients that will then support purchasing the 3 additional horses, then I can do it. And all this is all on paper before you buy the horse. These are all things that are numbers. These are all numbers.
Yep.
So, you use your numbers as tools.
I love all of this, and boy, oh boy, are we in sync. But we're running out of time. So what I want to do is give you the chance to tell our listeners where they can find out more about your services. And in that same sentence, I'm going to say, pay attention, listeners, because I think this is an invaluable one. Where can folks find you?
I have a website. It's Saul Bookkeeping, or you can email me at pam@saulbookkeeping.com. And you can call me 301-520-3937. I'm a horse person, so I don't work 9 to 5. I work 5 to 9. I work weekends. I work evenings. I know, most horse people, they're either teaching lessons during the day, and the only time they can really work on their business is in the evening. I understand that, so I'm available.
Great. Well, I say this to most of my guests, but this is especially true with you. I have 100 more questions. Maybe you can come back again at some point in the future and we can focus our discussion on, I would really like to know how things work with a 70 stall facility, because I'm of the mind that adding more horses doesn't necessarily mean adding to your bottom line. So maybe you can stew on that for a little bit and we can have a discussion about what is the sweet spot for the number of horses that's profitable for a boarding and training facility.
Be honored to come back.
All right. Thank you very much, Pam. To learn more about Pam Saul and Saul Bookkeeping, go to stallandstable.com, episode 140 show notes. And if you need help on the business planning side, this is the part that comes just before the bookkeeping side, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can send me an email at helena@stallandstable.com, or you can go up to our website and book a consulting session. Our business advisory services are available to professionals of all kinds, no matter what part of the equine industry you are in. Many thanks once again to our sponsors, American Stalls, Barn Pros, and Triple Crown Nutrition. And that's going to be a wrap for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it.